A very good morning to you. Always a pleasure to have you with us. A great start to the week. You're watching Morning Express right here on KTN News. My name is Jesse Rogers, and as always, we get to kickstart your day and your week in style, taking a look at the latest developments that have been covered in today's dailies and the nitty-gritty details that you might need to know about the day's developments. So do join us for the rest of the broadcast as we put everything into perspective. Speaking of putting things into perspective, let's take a look at what's transpiring, not just locally, but internationally as well. We begin closer home with the Daily Monitor. Let's take a look at the latest developments emanating from Uganda, where our government vaccines cash for COVID-19? That's the big question right now. As the country battles a ruinous second wave of COVID-19 pandemic and another lockdown, questions are being asked on the whereabouts of billions of shillings and donations sunk into vaccines. A similar question, if you look back at the journey we've had in terms of Kenya fighting the pandemic, even as they ask that, a lot is happening politically. Have the curtains closed on Kutesa's 40-year political journey? Find more details about that. He is the former Foreign Affairs Minister in Uganda. How safe are lodges during COVID-19 lockdown? More details on the Daily Monitor, even as Uganda COVID-19 vaccine at animal testing stage, says the government scientist. This is right after President Museveni, there's the report right there, where he said Uganda will actually make the COVID vaccines made in Uganda available quite soon. And this is good news coming from an African country. Let's see the progress right there. Shifting focus over to the East Africa, and let's take a look at what's happening in the region. COVID-19, Uganda goes into total lockdown. Of course, that particular news making headlines as the president charted the way forward in terms of fighting the pandemic, where they're deep into a wave right now. A lot of infections being recorded daily, where leaders mourn Kaunda as Africa's statesman. A lot of developments happening right there from Zambia. State 6 life sentence against Hotel Rwanda hero. It was quite controversial how he was brought into the country. And right now, the application process is still ongoing in the courts. Uhuru eulogizes Zambia's Kenneth Kaunda, of course, due to his key role in Africa's liberation struggle. More details on the East African. Over to Rwanda today. Let's take a look at what's transpiring right here. Local cement farms struggle to match large volumes of imports, where cement imports from Tanzania remain cheaper, even with the entry of local companies. New bread prices in Rwanda put off more families, where Rwandan families are set to dig deeper into their pockets to meet the cost of bread and pastries, whose price have risen. More details right there. And of course, Rwanda today also celebrating the late Kenneth Kaunda, who was one of the few to depart with reputation still intact. And this happening in the African continent, we tell him kudos. Quite a liberation struggle hero right there. Over to the Citizen. Let's take a look at what's happening there in Tanzania. The government warns of the third wave of COVID-19. Of course, the pandemic stretching its effects deep into the health sector and the economic sector of various countries. Tanzania saying their cases are on the rise, even as other countries bordering them are also recording similar cases. Surprising package as President Samia appoints a district commissioners, and the respect leadership changes. Tanzania Ports Authority urged to actually do, even as Uganda COVID-19 vaccine is at the animal testing stage, one of the key health developments happening in the region. Over to CNN World News. Let's take a look at what's happening internationally. Hong Kong journalist says newsroom raid sent shudders through the industry. Well, this is a fight against the Fourth Estate. A lot happening in Hong Kong. Make sure you're adequately aware. Duchess Meghan on her book. Some details right there, even as more details from Africa, Middle East and Europe on how students and teachers were abducted by armed men in Nigeria's Kebbi state. That's according to the governor. and more details on the Pfizer vaccine from Palestine. Make sure you're adequately informed on the latest developments happening in and around the continent. Even as we take a look at what's transpiring locally, this time round we have the Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard, right here, as well as the Daily Nation. Just taking a look at the front page, Uhuru's new look kitchen cabinet, where tables are practically turning. That's according to The Standard, where they mention with slightly over a year to go before he hangs up his boots, President Kenyatta has rejigged his team of advisors, dropping former loyalists and quickly filling up their slots with others. And of course, the shifting tables adequately covered on the front page of The Standard. The Daily Nation going big with this particular headline. It's all about the coalition and the unfinished business, quote and quote, as negotiators for Jubilee and ODM craft the proposed pre-election agreement. They will have to address the legal dilemma of ODM being in another coalition and the National Super Alliance and the political ramifications of such a deal for the ruling Jubilee party. That's on the front page of the Daily Nation and The Standard. We'll definitely take a look at some of the stories right now during the press review. Joining us in studio to help us deliberate on these matters and more, Arthur Odera, who's a former Teso North Member of Parliament. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Good morning.
Thank you, Jesse, and may I wish all fathers in the world a belated Happy Father's Day. May God bless you all.
Yes, they're doing a good job out there.
Yes.
Well, Kyoko is also joining us, or definitely not a new face, is a familiar face right here on the morning show. Good morning.
Good morning, Jesse. Good morning, Jesse, and good morning, Kenya. Let me join Mheshimiwa Odera here in wishing all fathers, me included and my father included, wherever he is, a happy belated Father's Day. We make the world go round.
Exactly. You deserve a pat on the back, as others would say. Anyway, let's get deep into what has been covered today in the dailies. I mentioned what's on the front page is all to do with Uhuru's new look kitchen cabinet. Over to page 4, they have more details on that particular story, where leaders who are initially a constant feature besides the president have been edged out, where the president is actually dropping loyalists as Raila joins the kitchen cabinet. Well, that's what they say about politics. It's an ever-changing game and it's driven by interest. Kyoko, what do you read from this?
Well, it's very interesting that this late in the tenure of President Uhuru, as he goes into the sunset of his political career, as would be the norm, he keeps changing advisors. Remember, right now, in any organized transition, President Uhuru or a president who's about to leave is looking at his legacy issues and his post-president life. What is the things that he will carry over in retirement that will define his after-presidency life? We've seen many a president, Barack Obama or former presidents of America, moving into the arena of creating a library or an education sphere, others moving into matters of social interest like combating HIV, others moving into matters of deepening democracy in areas or region where democracy was an alien factor. So for President Uhuru, being a young president or retiring at a relatively younger age, his handlers who have been with him in this entire period and who are coming close to him at this particular time should be at the core of redefining what will be his retirement agenda. What will he be doing post this presidency? Now, when you bring in new people, it means, one, either the retirement or moving out of the political scene is not an option that President Uhuru is looking at this particular point. Two, that he wants to have an active role in defining his succession plan, something that puts him in political quagmire vis-a-vis other political actors. So this is very interesting. And who is the person that has pulled in as an advisor? He's as per what has been reported, he's brought in Raila Odinga and his troops, or people who support the Raila Odinga agenda. And therefore it means he sees himself and Raila Odinga intertwined by the hips, joined by the hips. Whatever fate that will befall him as a former president, will also be suffered by Raila Odinga. Very interesting time, I can tell you.
Quite so. And we can't leave politics to politicians. But Arthur Odera, give us your take on this. A president who's deep in managing his succession plan. Many argue this might be a poison chalice. What's your take on this?
First of all, on management of succession, Jesse, it's nothing new. Presidents the world over, when they are leaving office, they are interested in making sure that what they believed in or what they pursued in the course of their presidency carries on beyond them. And I think if the intentions are pure and the legacy is clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a president trying to influence his succession. If the interests are narrow and selfish, then the citizenry will have a problem with it. And we have many examples. Lately, we had Obama, President Barack Obama, actively campaigning for Hillary Clinton, even though it did not work. Mandela essentially decided that Thabo Mbeki will succeed him vis-a-vis the more popular candidate then, who is now the president, Cyril Ramaphosa. And you can get many examples across the world. Coming to the issue of what is happening in Kenya now and the president rejigging his team, I think the president is following the dictum of, if it is not working, fix it. If it ain't working, or if the intentions have changed, the capabilities required have changed, circumstances have changed, and it is not working with the team you have, change the team, because the team matters. And I think that we are likely to see a lot of changes in the president's team, even in the teams of the contestants who are going to contest for the seat in 2022. People will relook at their team and say, this ain't working, this is not the right person, these are not the right people. I will change them and hopefully get a better team that delivers for those objectives at that moment and the circumstances at that moment better. So I would think that the president probably, because when you see change, you see an attempt to make it work better. And if that is the reason changes are being made, so be it. We would be happy to. Kenyans want things done differently. And within government and outside government, the president's kitchen cabinet, hopefully that it dovetails into the intentions that he has within government and for the people of Kenya. If he is attempting to make things work better, then hopefully we will then see the fruits at the end of the day.
Exactly. And more details are on page 4 of the Standard on how President Uhuru Kenyatta is rejigging his cabinet, where loyalists, some of them are being dropped while others are entering the foray due to the new political alignments at time. Make sure you grab yourself a copy. You're adequately informed. Over to what's on the front page of the Daily Nation. It's all to do with the coalition business, how talk of the Jubilee Party might actually be preparing to enter into a pre- and post-2022 election pact with the ODM party. Joseph Kioko, at first, were you surprised? Is this a good political strategy as we begin on this particular note?
I think it was long overdue. It was long overdue. If one follows the script of KANU NDP merger of 1997, when former President Moi, the late, started cooperation with the NDP, and it went on as we neared towards elections. The documents were signed, NDP was swallowed by KANU, Raila was made Secretary General. So that was an interesting coalition of a ruling party bringing in a strong opposition party led by Raila Odinga. Like the cartoons would say, the cockerel. The cock was not able to swallow the tractor. It ended up being constipated and an implosion happened. Now, this particular case is what Raila has been doing throughout. The cooperation, the handshake, it needed logically to be solidified into a political vehicle. Of course, on matters of development, you've seen the stronghold of Raila has gained or perceived to be gaining, but politically with the stalling of the BBI, then many issues come to the fore. If the script had followed properly, then one would easily have said it would have been cooperation, development, the BBI referendum. After the win of the BBI referendum, then now the question would have been since we've won this referendum, why don't we join together against the people who are against the referendum to sign into a power arrangement with Jubilee? Now, 3 stages of that maturity growth or that curve of growth have suffered strain. They've been stunted. That is why you are seeing this hurried push of Jubilee, a ruling coalition party, getting into a coalition with ODM. Then the question is, which Jubilee is this? Is it Jubilee A? Is it Jubilee B? What are the thinkings behind it? And again, it is the season of political collision. It is this point where people who are Heathrow allies are asking the tough questions. What political value do you bring to myself in advancing a particular agenda of capturing power? Okay. So you would find Kalonzo asking that question to Raila. You would hear Mudavadi asking the same thing. You would hear Ruto asking the same thing. And then after some time, there will be an internal realization. On my own, I cannot go far. Therefore, I need to look out for enemies or perceived enemies for that particular matter in my journey to acquisition of political power. So collusions will happen. Don't be shocked to see people who are never talking or people who say I might be silly to support another person the second time or third time, coming back and having a Saul to Paul moment of saying that was that thinking then, but today this is the reality on the ground.
And it usually follows with a connotation for the interest of the people.
Of the people,
yes.
Anyway,
I thought, give me your take on this, because I get the feeling that the handshake, at the end of the day, this was the penultimate goal. Do you sort of get that feeling, even though politicians did mention nothing to do with the political realignment? It's all to do with the 9 thematic areas. What's your take on this?
Well, I think that I've always said that beneath the handshake, there was a political arrangement, political understanding as a minimum, if not a political deal. And we are now seeing the intentions translating into actions. The intention, I think, has always been to bring Raila to the fore of government, accommodate him, pacify the country, and try to craft an arrangement that is acceptable to the current President Uhuru Kenyatta as a team that takes over from him. And a team it will be. Because every indication you see, every action that seems to be attributed to the President seems to indicate that he is building a team. He's not just fronting an individual or a group of individuals. He is building a team that can take over from him. And I think that's probably based on the realization that if you are to win an election in Kenya today, you need a team, you need a coalition, whatever you call it. And I think the focus on NASA is misplaced because it's not the name, it's the players. The players are alive and well, and one thing that is not in doubt, if you look at the players, take Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Weta, and several others that are within that team or that are expected to be within that team, one thing is not in doubt. They want to ascend to power. They want to be at the center of the country's affairs. They want to run the affairs of the country. And what options do they have? They don't have many options. One of the options available to them is to team up. A number of them swallow their pride, accept a role within that team, and then work as a team and deliver that election victory that I am sure they all crave. So I think that surprising as it may from a purely or a purist governance perspective, that an opposition party is allying with the government, the ruling party in government, but this is not about the past. This is about the future. This is going to be defined as a pre-poll coalition, if it's going to end up being a coalition, a pre-election coalition. And there is no, it's never too early to build a pre-election coalition. There will be doubts about what then happens to the country, who will be the voice of the opposition from now on. Thankfully, we have UDA being the voice of the opposition. Not as forceful, not as elaborate, not as effective as the Raila team was. Raila, when he was in opposition, you would count on him to have the information and the courage to speak out and bring to the fore things that needed to be brought to the fore. However, if Kenyans want to feel a representation, and if you go back to the spirit of the BBI that said we want every community in Kenya to feel represented, and the reality of Kenya is In many other countries, say the developed countries, if you talk about communities, you're not talking about ethnicities. You could be talking about business communities, religious communities, and so on, as they define themselves. In Kenya, when you talk about communities, if you want to use that word meaningfully, it is essentially ethnic communities, because that's how it's mobilized, that's how people feel, that's how people respond to situations, that's how resources are delivered. And so that reinforces the need to not forget that if you want to touch people, if you want to bring people to the table in Kenya, you use ethnic communities. And if the alliance that is being created makes communities feel that they are represented in the team, that they have their voice on the table, why not?
Would walking away from ethnic groupings, as others in the political sphere refer to it, be a recipe for disaster right now? Well, what's your take, Arthur?
I think that we need to do that. We need to get away from ethnic communities. We need to present to Kenyans an alternative way of seeing or having their sense of belongingness expressed. What are the alternatives? The alternatives in Kenya, if you ask me, is the economic sphere. You have communities of economic interest that define themselves based on livelihood, how they get their livelihood, based on how their interests are catered for. However, I don't think it's a black and white thing between ethnicity and economy. I'll give you two examples. Take coast, for example. If you take the coastal area, the economy of coast is not very different. The economy is structured not very differently from the way the ethnicities are structured. The issues of land in coast spread across. If you look at what they earn their living from, there are similar things they earn their living from. If you go to Western Kenya and you talk about sugarcane, and I mean Western Kenya, the original Western and Nyanza, the issue of sugarcane, maize, will define how people will respond to you. And a lot of people have won seats based on them presenting hope that lands on how sugarcane will be sold and how that market will be developed and so on. If you go to central Kenya, you cannot make sense without talking about tea and coffee and maybe potatoes and stuff like that. So again, there's a lot of gray area between what we regard as ethnic communities and economic communities, because by sheer fact of geography and the soil and history and productivity within that area, ethnicities are also bound economically. And if you want to affect those communities with economic solutions, you end up talking to a community that is ethnic rather than a community that's economic, but the economy binds them together in a certain way as well.
Okay, well noted. More details.
Maybe I can add on a little bit
sure.
on this matter. There are two schools of thoughts. There's one school that believes that seek first political kingdom and the rest shall follow, and how you go about it by all means necessary. So then they will organize to look towards acquisition of power, either by coming together as ethnic warlords or ethnic kingpins and pursuit of us as an ethnic bloc, joining together with other ethnic kingpins to acquire power. Then our economic problems will be resolved. I think that's the traditional model of organizing our politics. Then there's a new school of thought that is saying, let us seek first economic empowerment and then the rest shall follow. Because without economic empowerment, it doesn't matter who is the president. Let us create a leveling environment for us to thrive together. That's the new school of thinking that the DP Ruto is bringing on board. When you go to areas where they do not, or traditionally have not had a presidential candidate, and that's why I would want to pick on the Coast conversation, the Kisii conversation, the Northeastern conversation. To them, their pursuit of power is based on who comes and resolves our our economic marginalization. Who addresses that faster or conveniently for us? Once we believe in your agenda of addressing our economic marginalization, then we can get into the political power game. Then there are other communities like the Kamba Nation, partially the Luya Nation, the Luo Nation, the Kalenjin Nation, who believe that we must first seek to acquire political power. And for us to acquire political power, you pass through our ethnic kingpins. In Ukambani, you'll be told, go have a conversation with Kalonzo. In Western Kenya, you'll be told, go have a conversation with Mudavadi Wetangula. In Luo Nyanza, you'll be told, if you're not talking to Raila, it doesn't make sense. In Central Province, the conversation is with the Uhuru. And so those areas, somehow are the ones who ethnic mobilization towards power acquisition is core because they have their predefined leaders. In areas where there is no predefined leaders, there is nobody in that area who is asking to become a president, who is a viable presidential candidate, then you find for them the things that bring them together is economic mobilization. Now, that approach is similar to that thing of saying half empty, half full. It is not an either-or situation. Okay. What will be applicable in Cumberland will not be applicable in Coast. What will be applicable in Central Province might not be applicable in Guanyas. I think that's the fluidity of our politics as we stand today.
Exactly, and perhaps that's why the need, the necessity to actually get political spokespersons to agitate for a region's economic development, quote unquote. But a lot more details on page 4 of the Daily Nation, as I was mentioning. Let's talk about something that is definitely on the tongues of so many people, especially in the political scene, the BBI impact and why it is difficult to postpone the polls. Just recently, we've heard from various figureheads, including Francis Atwoli, mentioning there will be no elections without BBI. Authoritative, when you hear such a statement, how do you react to it briefly? We know how challenging it might be to postpone the elections, whether for a year or 6 months.
It is a scary statement, especially when it is offered authoritatively, as if Kenyans don't have an option. Let's remember, though, that to postpone a general election will require 2/3 majority in Parliament. It will require a justification that in Article 1 or 2 of the Constitution is defined as war. It is war. And, you know, people have interests. And in this country, sometimes you have a lot of talking heads who are used to express the interests of different groups of people and to test waters on how the public might react to such proposals. My own thinking is BBI cannot be a justification for postponing an election. It is not a justification in terms of the Constitution, and even in terms of common sense, BBI is not a life and death matter. Because if it is the constituencies, we have until 2024. If it is the 35% delivery of national revenue to the counties, it can be done through Parliament. A lot of the things in BBI, especially the ones that are popular, can be done through Parliament. So why not take that route? Parliament will take a few months and they will have passed that law, they'll have amended the Constitution, and nothing will change in terms of the calendar for elections. I think that the calendar, if an attempt is made to postpone the election just to serve the interest of a few, is going to cause problems in this country. It's going to cause a lot of disaffection. It is not a popular move. There is no reason for it. And not only will it be condemned and resisted in the public court of opinion, it will also be resisted in the courts of law. I am sure that that will become a battleground in the courts of law because there is no reason for it. You see, the BBI, or let's say the whole constitutional change process, because that's what the BBI is culminating into, there is nothing that you can say we cannot possibly have the next general election and hold the country together without going through the referendum as it is envisaged by the promoters of the BBI. There is nothing in there that is a make or break. Because look, Jesse, I mean, let's be fair. If you're talking about the titles of Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, official leader of opposition, and so on, what is that about? It is about power. That power, as we speak, rests somewhere. The power of what will be called the Prime Minister already rests with somebody called Leader of Majority in Parliament. The power of the official leader of opposition right now rests with somebody called official leader of minority in Parliament. The two deputy prime ministers, in the scheme of things, are fairly peripheral. Nothing will change in that regard. And remember also that these individuals will have to be elected to seats in some constituencies somewhere for them to come to Parliament and to be able to provide that leadership. So if it is about division of power, one would say, take a look at the government as it is structured now. Take a look at the ministers. Are the appointments skewed towards certain regions? Certainly, yes. Why don't we address that now? reassure Kenyans that we can be fair. The Constitution says there must be fairness in distribution between ethnic groups and all other interest groups. Are we having that now? No. So if we cannot demonstrate the goodwill by doing it right and then showing Kenyans that, okay, it can be done, now let us have the legal structure via constitutional change to get it to be done all the time consistently for all Kenyans to be assured that they will get representation in government, either ethnically, religiously, geographically, whatever it is. So there is no make or break around BBI. I support BBI purely on the basis that it's going to deliver more resources, that's good for minorities, good for grassroots development at the regional level. I support it because it's going to set a time limit to prosecution of corruption cases. I don't mind the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister positions because, as opposed to the popular view, it's not going to take anything away in terms of cost. Okay. I also support it because of the ability of the opportunity to appoint ministers from within Parliament that will cut costs and appoint CECs to county cabinets. That is going to cut enormous costs across the country. So I have a basis for supporting it, but it's not a make or break. However, we can also do it through Parliament. Let us adopt the Plan B, the initiative of the 13 members of Parliament who started, an initiative to come up with 10 issues they want passed through Parliament. Can we support that? It is cheaper. It is faster. It delivers what we want delivered without the expense of the referendum, without the do or die battle in courts. Yeah. If that is done, the court battles will become less important. It will take away the stakes. It will help us to focus on what's important. And the president says he wants to focus on his Big Four agenda. He should release himself from that do or die battle and focus on what's important. I think that's what Kenyans want him to do.
Yeah, but the stakes are high, Kioko, in the political scene right now. The political elite club seems to have been thrown into confusion and disarray following that particular ruling by the 5-judge bench. And right now, one gets a sense that it's all to do with the promises that BBI held for those who are looking into political oblivion. Talk about second-term governors. Talk about the political elite who are looking for formations to fit into. What's your take on this?
I think, Jesse, we need to understand the political value of the conversations around BBA and the referendum. And we go back again, because history defines, and the actors are still the same. In 2005, the referendum of 2005, Machungwa, orange versus banana. That is what led to the formation of ODM, Orange Democratic Movement. The referendum of 2005 was also a mobilization thing that created a wave that lasted up to 2007 and was a legitimacy tool in the state, in the running for state capture by Raila Odinga. So this was a replay scenario. Start the cooperation, start the handshake, get into a referendum so that the issues that are canvassed in the referendum first bring all of us together, and then we use that wave into the 2013 election, and we will be able to deal with the opponents of BBI. Now, Francis Atwoli is not foolish. He's not a foolish man by all standards, and you only dismiss him at your own peril. Now, what has happened is that there is an attempt to remove the conversations of BBI from the political discourse of the day and let it run in the judicial system, where we were all gagged from commenting on it. Yeah. So Francis Atwoli scares us. He is telling us, if you guys do not want to talk about BBI, then we will be forced to postpone the election, so that the conversations that are contained in BBI can also become part of the campaign conversations as we move towards 2022. How is that possible? Today, because, and you know, all these things must be seen from that prism of UDA.
Quite so.
And the opponents of Jubilee. Now, the conversations that are there, today, with William Ruto running away with the economic conversation, empowering of the hustlers, the other side somehow did not have a counter conversation